And we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Kayla, and I have a very special guest with me today, which is Erin S. Jones, author of many books that you can see behind me and we'll talk about. But thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's amazing to be here.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Can you introduce yourself, your books, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm Aaron S. Jones. I'm author of the Broken Gods trilogy, which is Flames of Rebellion, Paths of Chaos, and End of Days. And I'm also the author of my latest release, which is Memories of Blood and Shadow, which is in the self-published fantasy blog off this year, the eighth time it's been run. So yeah, epic fantasy author. And yeah, just really happy to be here to talk about the books.
And there's a bit of, I'm not sure if it's grimdark or dark fantasy to some of these books as well, right?
Yeah, there's definitely an edge of grimdark in there. I think a lot of times when I start writing, I try to go for that grimdark feel, but I always sort of slip in a bit of hope in there. So I don't think I'm quite at the George Martin levels of grimdark at the moment, but lots of quite dark, violent elements to all of the stories that I write.
Yeah, that's fair. Not quite there, a slice of hope, but
Yeah, yeah, just a bit.
got to throw that in somewhere. So, with all of these books, your most recent one is Memories of Blood and Shadow. With your first trilogy, I'm sorry, I'm mirrored here. The first trilogy here is your first novels. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Flames of Rebellion was the first novel that I published. So if you ever saw what Flames of Rebellion looked like in the first state, it was a completely different story. Called
Oh,
Blood of the Heretic. That was when I first started trying to piece things together. Had an editor look at it, tell me what I was doing well, what I wasn't doing so well, and then I sort of reshaped the whole thing. It turned into almost a completely different novel. And then yeah, Flames Rebellion turned into the Broken Gods trilogy with Paths of Chaos and End of Days, which I think was released in January of this year. So not too long
okay.
ago, the trilogy was finished.
And what inspired you to start writing this trilogy?
It's I think I've always enjoyed writing stories. Stories have always been just what I'm drawn to and I love being quite creative. I think with Flames of Rebellion, when it was in its first incarnation of Blood of the Heretic, I was at university, so it was about just over 10 years ago, and I was reading Joe Abercrombie's The Blade itself, um, and I'd always been into fantasy, but mainly high fantasy, so things that are very similar to Lord of the Rings, which I'm obsessed with. But reading Joe Abercrombie, and I think I just started reading Game of Thrones as well. I think those two books sort of turn on a switch in my head that I could write something that's a bit more grounded. So have the fantasy elements, but have it be a bit more realistic. So characters acting with a bit more grit. Things are quite, quite grubby. So the worlds of Westeros and in the first Lord trilogy, they feel real even though there's fantasy elements. So it's quite different to something like say Lord of the Rings. I think the fact I was reading stories like that sort of made me realize that maybe I can give this a go and have a bit of fun with it. And something that became a bit of a hobby turned into something that basically took over my life. And yeah, it turned into what eventually became Flames of Rebellion.
I think that's what you would call finding your passion when
Oh,
it takes over your
definitely.
life.
In a good way.
Yes, yes. I'm not gonna complain. I haven't read the trilogy yet. I'm actually planning to start it in July as a part of the Indie Accords readathon,
Yeah.
and or yeah, readathon. And then I did read Memories of Blood and Shadow as an arc, and that was just phenomenal.
Thank you.
So I'm very happy you took the time to write
Yeah.
those. Um, talking about some of your favorite books that inspired you, would you say the genre of fantasy is where you sit mostly as a reader?
As a reader, I'd say I'm quite diverse in my reading. When I was at university, my degree was English literature, so I read quite a scope of different things. Growing up,
Oh,
I think it was mainly fantasy.
oh, sorry. I'm
Um,
gonna have to pause you there, Aaron. Just your mic is gone out there, quite staticky.
let's see if I can. Is that better?
As about the same.
Ah,
It was doing good.
um, see if I can change anything on here. Is that any better?
I was about the same. I'm sorry.
Oh no.
It was holding out and then it just it failed.
Yeah, I think it's this iPad.
Oh dear. Okay. Um, let's see. Bear with us, folks.
I'll just be one moment to see if I can get it up on my laptop.
Sounds good. We'll be here. So while we're waiting, let's talk a little bit about Aaron's books because I know I said I haven't read the trilogy yet, but I have read Memories of Blood and Shadow, and it was fantastic. I originally picked it up as an ARC before it released, and what sold me was the cover, which I'll try and show you guys here. And the premise that it is a young man who sets out to basically he sets out to try and kill a god, and a nomadic orphan as he is. So it just caught my attention based on that. There's so much action in this. I believe Aaron took inspiration from the King Killer Chronicles as well. Hello, Chris. Welcome. Not late at all. We're just experiencing some technical difficulties, but Aaron will be right back. So you haven't missed much yet. Thank you for joining us. So Memories of Blood and Shadow is probably going to be one of my top reads of this year. It was so good. It's set into basically 3 parts within the book. Yes, all of them. All of them have such great cover art. For the trilogy that he wrote here, the Broken Gods trilogy, these are the second edition. So these covers are redesigns from the first edition. And so, yeah, Memories of Blood and Shadow, it follows a young boy who has been orphaned and his life trying to set out to bring down a god. The adventures he goes through, there's found family. It's all a beautiful story. There's so much to it that I absolutely loved. And Aaron was talking about this a little bit at the beginning of the stream. And that is that he writes mainly some grimdark fantasy, but he doesn't quite classify it as grimdark for the reason that he does put in a little bit of hope into the stories. So there's that dark element with a slice of hope in there as well. So, for anyone watching, have you heard of Erin before? Their writing? Yes, it is. It's Memories of Blood and Shadow was entered into SPFBO's 8th run, so we'll see how it does. I'm voting for it. Okay. I hope you enjoy it. It's it's one of those books I didn't know I needed to read. Hello.
Hi.
There we go. Oh, try again.
Hello.
Hello. So just run through a little audio test there for me, Erin, if you can.
Can you? Hello.
There we go. I think there was a little bit of lag there.
Okay. Does that sound okay?
Yes, you're not cutting out like a robot. So we'll see how that goes.
That sounds better.
That's great. So thank you for bearing with us, everyone, while while we work that out. So yeah, we were talking about if the fantasy genre was your entry point as a reader into writing, or if there are other genres that got you started.
Yeah. So basically a wide variety of books. When I was at university, it was a lot of Shakespeare and Dostoevsky. So lots of books. I think I was the only one on my course that said that their favorite book was Lord of the Rings, which at the time I think I was about. But looking back, I'm proud of being able to say that because fantasy is the thing that's driven me since since I was. But yeah, I read a lot of fantasy now. But because I think because I write quite a lot of fantasy, I like to also reading sci-fi and horror. If I see a good review online of something else, I'll grab it. I'm not someone that's just going to read within one genre. Anything can take my fancy.
Right. Well, that's good. I know. I think I actually did. I just recently DNF a Dostoevsky book. I might have.
Do you know which one?
It might not have been. It was Dr. Zhivago. I can't remember if it was Dostoevsky or not.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it just I couldn't.
His stuff is difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just very confusing. There was no grounding to the characters or the situations. So I reread the beginning twice and I still didn't know what I was reading, unfortunately. But that's great that you stood up and you're like, yeah, I love Lord of the Rings. I think when you're in that kind of class, that was probably hard.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, really glad that that's me. Like, I'm glad that I didn't say something else just to try and impress somebody.
Yeah, yes. And when you're writing your books, do you have a specific message or something that's important to you that you focus on as much as you can while writing? So maybe the world building or the characters, just something that means a lot to you when you're trying to build these stories.
Every time I start writing a story, it's either a focus on one character and just trying to get that person's
personality to shine through. So it's what does this character want from this story? What's their character arc? What do I want them to do? What do I want them to finish as? It's always based around that one character, or it comes as one scene. So I think because I'm influenced by film, so I watch as many different films as possible, and I think that's why you'll see that my books are quite dialogue heavy. It's a film script, and that's sort of how I visualize things in my head. So there's not as much description, just because I'm sort of, it's almost like I'm play out as I'm writing. So it's either looking at a character and trying to focus on what they need, or it's just a really cool scene, and then the whole book based on how to fit that scene in. And then as it comes along, it's, adding some more things. So I think when I first started writing Flames, it was in its awful first draft. There was a couple of characters that I started writing that I really enjoyed trying to describe and to see what they were capable of. But it ended up just being lots of cool scenes. So I was told that, yeah, that's really good, but it doesn't fit in with the next part. And basically decided to plan it a bit more in depth. So looking at the actual character beats, the actual story that are necessary to link it all together. And I remembered the Flames of Rebellion. I sent it back to my editor, and she was like, "Okay, this is good now." But I was like, "There's something missing. And I ended up adding a whole subplot to do with the Plague Doctor mask, which is on the front cover of the book. And as soon as I was able to get that, everything in the story just clicked. So it just felt like there was a missing piece. So I think now to sitting down, like when I was doing Memories of Blood and Shadow, it's a case of if I do get a character in my head or a scene. So with Memories of Blood, the first scene of just an aging warrior almost looking back on his life and regretting the mistakes that he's made. It was almost like a Clint Eastwood kind of feel. And once I'd done that, it was a case of, okay, now I need to actually sit down and plan a story instead of just trying to do loads of cool stuff one after another.
Right. So you built up with the from the cool scenes to actually fitting in the plots and the dialogues of the characters, building them up from there. So it all started with really cool scenes.
Yeah, it's kind of it is just like, what would I like to see if this was made into a TV series or a film, and then it just sort of goes from there. Because if I don't do that, then I don't really enjoy. I need to sort of be amazed by something cool happening first of all. Once I've got that, I can sort of fit in everything else and develop story.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I mean, if that's like you said, you enjoy TV shows and that format. So going back to that and what you would enjoy, that makes sense, because oftentimes if you try and write what other people will enjoy rather than what you're enjoying, you might fall flat with your audience.
Definitely, yeah. And I found that as well with dreaded reviews when you first release a book and they start coming through. It's always quite interesting because I remember with Memories of Blood and Shadow, within the same day there were 2 different reviews, and one of them was there's far too much description, but everything else is okay. And about 2 hours it was there's too little description, but everything else is okay. And I think when I read those 2 one after another, I was like, okay, this is cool. You can't write for everyone else. You have to write a story that you love first of all. And if you do that, some people will love it, some people will hate it.
You'll get some people in between. Yeah, that's a really, of course, on the same day too. That's that's a really interesting coincidence. Chris has a question here. Are you writing full time, or is that a long-term goal?
I'm not writing full time. I do, but I'm also a teacher at a primary school in England. So would I like to write full time? I think that's the dream of every writer, but I think I'd also not want to leave teaching. I think it's such a vocational job that means a lot. If there was any chance I was able to maybe, write a bit more, but still carry on teaching, that's fun. I'm kind of in a segment where I'm able to write the stories that I enjoy. I'm getting them out pretty fast as well at the moment. I think the 4 books I've released have been released. So yeah, I think I would like to write full time, but I'd like to keep some aspect of teaching in my life.
Maybe a full-time retirement gig from when you're retired from teaching.
Oh,
You
definitely.
can focus on writing.
Yeah.
It's true. Such dynamic reviews from even the most popular books. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know you taught, Chris. That's awesome.
It's the best job. Exhausting, but love it.
Yeah, you and I were talking about this before, but I've got 1 kid, and I can't imagine teaching a class of 20 plus or 30 plus kids. So we've got these books here, but I actually forgot to mention you also have a short story for this trilogy here. Is that right?
So yeah, it was a case of I think I was between books, and the books within quite a short amount of time. And I think I was feeling a bit of burnout at writing novels. Additional novel writing month in November, where I think I did about 80,000 words in a month. It was a bit of a break from writing full-length novels, but I just love the characters from the story. It was at a point where I was so into that world that I was writing that the characters were just having stories in my head, and it was a case of I've away. And loads of my friends had finished reading like the proof version of the book, and they were like, "I need something else," and I was like, "Well, I'm not so tired." So what I did is I just wrote a few short stories called the collection's called A Long Way From Home. Little snippets of what those characters are doing at different times away from that trilogy. And yeah, available as an audiobook as well, which is the only thing I've got at the moment as an audiobook. But yeah, it was just a bit of fun, really. I wanted to keep it old, but not have the pressure of having to write a full-length novel, which can be a bit draining at times.
Just wanted to get those mini adventures out of your head onto paper.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So it's available as an audiobook, you said. Is that on Audible or is it on a different platform?
It's through Amazon. It's through Audible that people can get
Nice. I'm going to take a look at that because I love audiobooks. Hello, Jordan.
Yeah, me too.
Welcome.
Hi.
So with these books that you've written, like you said, you wrote a lot in a short period of time. Did you have a favorite trope when you were writing?
I think for me, it always comes back to found family. It's just these almost broken people that have been just discovering people like them and getting together and facing. When I was writing the trilogy, like little did I know that the world was about to enter a full-blown pandemic. So I think then writing Memories of Blood and Shadow, that was like smack bang at the start of the pandemic, and you've just got so much inspiration from people around the world at the time. People going through this really difficult period of history, but we're all sort of just plowing through it. people are just, even now, like people must be suffering such trauma from the experience of the last few years, but everyone's just carrying on with their lives. I think the found family aspect when I'm writing just always shines through, because people can't be on their own. People have to find people to be able to move on to the next step, to push forward. So I think that's something that will probably appear in almost any piece of writing. With Tavar in Memories, it was, he's almost like a lone ranger first of all, but telling his story, you sort of see these people that have gone through horrible things he's connected with, and just, found that little family that gets him through.
Yeah, that definitely came across while I was reading Memories of Blood and Shadow. And found family tropes for me are one of my personal favorites to read, for the same reasons that you said. Like, from everything that went on in the world, people are still struggling, but we have to keep going, right? So I think you portrayed that feeling very well in this.
Oh, thank you.
Kind of following that, did you have a favorite character to write? Because you're, at least for Memories in Blood and Shadow, it felt very character driven. So I'm curious to see, even from this trilogy, I know I haven't read it yet, and we'll still keep all this spoiler free. But was there a favorite character out of your works that you've written?
I think in Memories, it was, I really liked writing Alice, one of Tavar's early friends in the story, and I made her go through some horrible things, but she said she just gets through it, and I think I quite liked how in my head she just came as this fully formed character of accept what other people want me to do. I've got my own path. I'm going to make it, and like I said, she does go through some, but no matter what happens, she comes out stronger each time. It's almost like she's forged by fire. Tavar was a lot of fun, and I'm writing the sequel, and it's Tavar's an interesting character now. So I think the sequel will be quite surprising. I'm taking it. But yeah, he's always a lot of fun. From the original trilogy, that makes it through the first draft that I ever wrote about 10 years ago, the really awful draft. And he's called Spike, and when I first started writing him, so I was about 19, I think. I just read The Blade itself, the first trilogy, and I just made Sly out to be this horrible, horrible person who's just, he just loves killing, he loves fighting, warrior. But then as I started developing the trilogy, I just ended up absolutely adoring him. And I think his character growth is just built from the fact that he starts off as this disgusting, horrible person, but sort of changes along the way. He's still horrible, but the changes that he goes through and the way he develops, I have a soft spot. He's the character I think I love the most.
And sorry, what was his name?
Sly.
Sly. Okay, I'm gonna keep my eye out for that. It's funny how it sounds like the side characters were some of your favorites in this.
Yeah, I think with characters, it's almost like you spend so much time with them that it's almost like you get not tired of them, but and it almost feels as though it's too easy to say they're the favorite characters. I think that's why I quite liked writing the short stories. Grab these side characters and put them front and center and show people what they're like in different times. And I think side characters are a lot of fun because you've got so much more room with them. With a main character, you kind of have to throw them in front of the reader and say, look, this is the character I'm taking you on a journey with. I need you to like them at least a little bit. I've got to show you as much as possible. But with side characters, you've got that sort of shadowiness. They're in the shadows. There's a bit more scope. There's a bit more things to work on. So I think that's why I find them a bit more interesting talking about them.
Yeah, and I mean, there's more that you can, I guess, do with the side characters as well, because you don't see everything of their story, right? Where the main character, you get to see everything that pretty much happens to them, but these side characters, they can go off and have crazy adventures and then come back later on in the book, or, you know, go away even for like a week and then come back, and you never know what kind of adventures are happening behind the scenes too. I mean, you would know. I won't.
It's almost like it's the thrill of the unknown.
Yeah. Hello, Esme. Thank you for stopping by.
Hi.
Yes, this was Memories of Blood and Shadow was entered in this year for SPFBO.
Yes, so this is the second, but the Flames of Rebellion I entered last year. Got some really good reviews, but didn't make it past the first round. So fingers crossed I can at least go one better this year.
I've got my fingers crossed. There was a lot in Memories of Blood and Shadow that I was not expecting. First of all, the what caught my attention for it was, one, the cover, because I found it through you doing a call out for ARCs on Twitter, I think, and the cover just stood out. There was a caption, I think, that you had saying, "A nomadic orphan sets out to kill a god," and the fact that the setting is also different, which was so refreshing, which it's inspired by the Middle East. So those that combo is
as
really
a teacher,
nice.
As a teacher, I moved out to the Middle East a couple of years ago for 2 years. So I think I wanted to write a story that was inspired by that setting. I remember arriving, getting off the plane, getting picked up in the middle of the night in the middle of a desert, getting dropped up in a I couldn't see anything, even on the horizon. It was just desert. And I just remember being so affected by it that it was the perfect setting for a story. And then when I came back to the UK and I was writing more, I just thought I'd have characters like the people that I'd met in the Middle East. So I've got characters that are named after some of my friends that I used to work with, because I was working in a setting where there was such a diverse group of people. So people from all nationalities, religions. I felt like these people needed to be represented, and they are represented, but we need to shine a light on them in fantasy a bit more, I think. And I've been reading things like Zamil Akhtar's Gunmetal Gods and Lightblade, which is incredible, and series, which is like set in like Egypt. And I'm always interested in other cultures. I think being a teacher as well, I learned the Romans, the ancient Greeks. We do Native Americans as well. And because I spend so much time teaching, when it comes to writing, it sort of just seeps through. And it's kind of like, every single writer that does fantasy has probably done a story within a medieval English setting. So it's like, what's the point in trying to, compete with that? Let's try and do something a bit different and stand out from the crowd. And thankfully, when the cover done with the company Niblat, who are from Ukraine, I remember them saying, "Do you want like a Prince of Persia vibe?" And I was like, "I like playing computer games. That sounds about right." And they came back with this, and it was just absolutely perfect. The tone, the colours, the style. I think it really fit the story. So yeah, I couldn't have asked for anything more from them.
Yeah, it looks fantastic, and I think they did the redesigns as well for the Broken Gods trilogy. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, they did. Yeah, I love those kind of days. That's my favorite.
Yes, I'll try and show it here in a second, but it feels something right out of Elden Ring, the game. But it is just like horrifyingly creepy. When you're talking about the setting being somewhere different, and what a way to honor your friends by putting them in the book, or at least using their names. As a reader, I try and read different genres to keep out of reading slumps because the settings in fantasy worlds can get repetitive. So, reading Memories of Blood and Shadow, while it's still fantasy, was really nice and refreshing because it wasn't the same setting and it gave a completely different feel to the fantasy genre while reading. And I really appreciated that because it's nice to have that dynamic when you're reading books. You're not just stuck reading the same settings. You have options within the genre.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think fantasy is inspired by either medieval England or Viking history, because it's quite a it's quite an interesting time in history anyway. These are obviously people who were fighting quite often as well, so you've got instant conflict. But I actually teach children at work. I teach Middle Eastern history, and especially Baghdad around 1000 AD. It's an history where Europe was going through a dark age. The Middle East was actually going through a golden age. It's just so interesting about what's happening, the progress they were making, and you've got the Mongolian hordes attacking as well. So I think the more diverse you have with history, the more sort of influence you can have in your writing. So yeah, it's definitely been a help.
Yeah, I guess the more you know, the more you can influence your own story. You kind of talked about this a little bit, but Chris, I was actually asking a question in the chat, which is what you're currently reading, or are your inspirations for the books.
So I've just been on holiday to Crete in Greece, and because I wasn't just relaxing by a swimming pool, I had quite a lot of time to read. So I've just read through Anna Smith Sparks' Quarter, which I think I've actually got somewhere here. Yeah, so it's got to be one of the best books I think I've read in the last decade. It's not something that I'd recommend to everyone. It's really poetic language, and the style is quite jarring at first because it's not like any other fantasy book you've read. It's quite literary. Every single word you can tell she just chose with an exact purpose. It's just a beautiful, beautiful novel. The characters are disgusting, and it's proper grimdark. So if you're a fan of the darker side of fantasy, this is the book for you. And I've also read Brother Red by Adrian Selby, which again is really, really dark. For some reason, I'm just reading proper grimdark at the moment. Seeping into my writing. I think because I'm playing Elden Ring quite a lot as well, that's also having an effect. Yeah, with inspiration, I think my biggest inspiration is probably Joe Abercrombie. Everything is written. I think my favorite fantasy book is probably The Heroes, which is his standalone book, but it's set around one battle over 3 days. Yeah, I love the characters in that. But I'd say other inspirations, because I'm into a lot of films and a lot of games, Elden Ring now as well. I think so many different things inspire me. I love Japanese history, so they'll be in the books towards like samurai. If you read Memories of Blood and Shadow, they talk about Okada, which is this empire, and that's Japanese based or influenced by the sort of Shogun era. I'm having a lot of fun with that in the sequel at the moment. So yeah, there's such a wide range of influences at the moment, but the two key ones at the moment I'd say are the Court and Elden Ring, if I can pick a video game.
You can certainly pick a video game. I was gonna say, because for Memories of Blood and Shadow, there was a bit of what felt like Japanese inspiration in there somewhere, but I didn't want to assume. But it definitely felt like that in a part of the book. So I'm glad I did pick up on that right.
Yeah, it's
nice,
just a light touch, but I'll put through a lot more in the sequel when we start to open up the world.
Well, I'm very excited for that. I believe in your author notes at the end of Memories of Blood and Shadow, you had mentioned you'd also taken inspiration from the King Killer Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss, is it?
Yes, the framing of the story is definitely inspired by The Name of the Wind. So for those that haven't read it, it's the main character almost telling his story to somebody across 3 days, and those are the 3 books, of which 2 have been released. Who knows when the other one will be released, ready to get it out in the world. But yeah, the Name of the Wind was, again, that was a key book for me in that I'd done my English literature degree and read lots of like literary fiction and like Dostoevsky, Shakespeare, like heavy prose, beautiful poetic prose. And then I also loved fantasy. So I was reading Joe Abercrombie at the same time and George Martin. With Patrick Rothfuss, he almost met the 2 styles that I loved. And it's such a dense text. It's still pure fantasy, and the way he mixes music into it, I think is just incredible. And I remember rereading it for about the 3rd or 4th time, just after I think I'd finished Paths of Chaos, which is the second Broken God. And I remember just getting my laptop out and I think it's about 1 a.m, and I just wanted to start writing that first chapter, and that's actually the chapter where, visited by these 2 people in the middle of a storm, and then he ends up telling his story to one of them.
Yes.
Big inspiration there, and I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, the opening chapter in Memories of Blood and Shadow was definitely captivating.
Thank you.
Yes, Jordan, you do. I'll be forever
Mongolian fantasy would be incredible.
Yes. Yeah, I'll forever be there's that gif of the woman throwing the book, saying read the book, and just throwing it at someone's face. That will be forever me. Awesome. Always love finding new reads. I'm gonna, at the end of this stream, I'll try and go back as well and pick out some of those books and put them in the description.
Excellent.
So with all of these books, these inspirations, you talked a little bit about your plan for future books. I know you mentioned them a little bit, but can you give an idea of what's next?
Well, that's quite a long answer for that.
Oh dear.
So Memories of Blood and Shadow was written during the pandemic, so it's quite a while ago. And that was the most recent thing that I've actually released. It was only between the time that I finished that and now, I've started writing about 3 different books.
Oh my gosh.
And I just started writing another one about an hour before doing this interview. So I've got a chapter 1 done on something completely different. So I think the next book I'll probably finish will be the sequel to Memories of Blood and Shadow, because a lot of people seem to be reading it at the moment and enjoying it. I'm kind of back in the mindset of the characters and the world. So at the moment, I have plans for the sequel, which I think it will just be a duology. I don't think it'll be a trilogy.
Okay.
But I did say that Memories of Blood and Shadow would be a standalone until about a week before I finished it. So who knows? And then I've got a short story collection from Memories of Blood and Shadow, which will be the Okada short story collection, which will be Japanese on that realm. The Navaking collection, which is where a character Halfor's from. The Blood Nation and the Alfaran collection and the Empire of Shadow collection. So I've got lots of ahead at the moment that I want to sort of get out. So that's what's probably coming towards the end of this year, start of next year. And then one of my favorite things that I'm writing at the moment is a murder mystery. And it's an orc murder mystery, where there's an orc that's marrying a human, and the night of the wedding, then dies, and he has to clear his name. So he finds a detective who's a dwarf who drinks up. Together they try and work out who murdered the bride, and that's just been a load of fun.
That sounds really funny. Well, I mean, I know it's a murder mystery, but it sounds like a really funny setting for a murder mystery.
Yeah, it's. I think because of what I've been writing is quite heavy and like proper epic fantasy. I think with this, I just wanted to have a bit of fun, and I remember someone I think wrote, what's your next book going to be, and like loads of people writing what their next book would be. And I think I was just a bit bored, and I put Orc Murder Mystery Dwarf Detective, and I had so many people go, yes, I will read that.
Yeah, it's amazing what people will jump on, because even with where I think it's over here, Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I've never heard of a cozy fantasy before, and I loved it. It was fantastic. It was just like you said, it was different from the epic fantasy, and done in a way that still had all the character building. It still had relatable characters, an interesting world, but it was just done in a way where you felt like you had a big hug afterward instead of emotionally devastated.
Yeah.
So that
Fantasy
is
books are like
yeah. Yeah, so many fantasy books are out to get the readers' hearts. That's a lot of work in progress pieces you've got.
yeah, too many.
Well, I will say for because you mentioned that when you started writing Memories of Blood and Shadow, you said it was going to be a standalone. It does read as a standalone. I think you can stop there, but altogether, I'm still very excited for the sequel. Can you give us a brief overview of what your writing process is like? Because you've put out quite a few books in a short period of time, and you've got lots on the go. How do you manage all of this while working a full-time job?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. My writing process has changed quite a lot since I started used to be that I just wrote 2,000 to 3,000 words every single day, no matter what. Just if I was bored with it, if I was tired, I'd just force it out. Whereas I think the more confident I've become as a writer, the more we've just not taking it as it comes, but I know that I've got certain times when I can write, so I can get out, say, I can get 1,000 quickly. So most days I can get at least 1,000 done. So what I try and do is at the start of a novel, it's normally the time when it's an exciting new idea. It's like the new shiny toy. So that's when I try and get quite a lot done. And then it's just a case of and maybe spending a week or two just plotting out the key points, coming up with the key beats and the character arcs. Once I've done that, what normally happens is the characters just lead me on a completely different direction to what I've spent all that time. So it happens that I always get to the destination I want to. I always know where I'm going to finish. But as I'm writing, I always have a different story to the one that I've actually sat down and planned. I like to listen to music when I'm writing. Listening to I don't know, something quite heavy, there'll suddenly be a battle thrown in at a certain point, or someone dies, or if it's quite emotional, someone's going to have like quite a difficult death scene. And I'm very influenced by music when writing. But yeah, I'd say the main process I go for is just put music on, sit down, try and get to at least 1,000 words. And like in November with the National Novel Writing Month, that's when I really sort of kick into gear. And no matter what point in the story I'm at, I will 1,000 words in that month. And that's the reason I've been able to get 4 books done in the last 4 years that are quite books as well. But I wouldn't say there's anything specific that I do apart from the music. Music's a really important part of the process.
This question's probably just maybe my curiosity, because I play instruments. But do you ever listen back to those songs and think of the scenes that you wrote while you were listening to it?
Yes, all the time. There can even be like just a little refrain or just part of a chorus that just takes me back. There's a bit in Flame, and this isn't a spoiler because of the title. There's a bit where there's lots of flames and almost like a town burns. I remember I was writing that because I was listening to a soundtrack to Final Fantasy, and the music reminded me of a part in the game where I was standing in front of flames, and it's just so iconic. I remember that music just came on, and it completely changed the way I was trying to tell the story, and which is why it ended up being the front cover of the book. But yeah, the certain songs that I've loved for my whole life, but then now, I can remember, I can remember that piece of music making Tafar do X, Y, or Z. But yeah, I with music and writing.
That's really interesting. It's always interesting to me, I guess, because we associate certain things or certain tasks with a sound or a place when we're doing something, right? So the music when you're writing a book, it takes you back to that specific scene when you were writing it. I know when like, for example, I go for walks and I plug in an audiobook. After I finish the audiobook and I walk without my earbud in, I still think of the scenes from the book I was listening to when I was walking in that same spot. So it's neat that you as a writer experience that too.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing.
Yeah. And along with the writing, do you have any writing tips for someone who's aspiring to be an author, or anything that you would recommend? for someone looking to start that process?
I think for first-time writers, I think the key thing is just finish whatever you're trying to write. Get through the first version. So, like I said, when I did the first draft of Flames of Rebellion, it was called Heretic, and it was an absolute mess. It was, it had like little nuggets, like golden nuggets in there, but it was just a giant monster of everything that I loved mashed together into this incoherent just pile of sludge. But the fact that I'd finished the book, you could sit back and go, okay, I can actually write a novel. I can do this. And then it's the next piece of advice I'd say is get an editor and listen to the advice they give. Get some hard skin. Like you're gonna have to, and you're gonna have to accept it and learn from it. And that's how you become a better writer. You write as much as possible. You devour as much media as possible. So watching films, I've constantly got a notepad by me when I'm watching a film. I see something that's quite cool. Just listen to music, play games, watch films. Everything you do is all part of the writing process. But yeah, the most important thing is just get a good editor. Get your book out there and let people read it and just listen to the feedback and keep. I think I see some advice out there, and some people are just saying that just you've got to write a certain amount every day. But if that's you, don't go for it, because you can get quite fatigued with that. So I think it's quite a personal journey to go on. So just find what works for you. If you love writing, just keep going. Don't stop.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's easy to burn out whenever you're doing something so much and so often that you don't take breaks from it. So that's I think really great advice. Along with that question, you're self-published. Was there anything that surprised you about that process? Anything that you might want to give a heads up to for anyone in that self-publishing process themselves?
I say one of the big warnings is it's going to be expensive if you're self-publishing. So again, it has to be, the best thing about it is you have a lot of creative control. So whatever you want to do with your story, which is different to obviously going other routes. It is going to be expensive. You need to pay for an editor. But that's the most important. You need to pay for an editor and listen to them. One of the surprising things I found out is that you can get quality covers that aren't very expensive. So the ones I've had for the new covers for the Broken Gods and Memories of Blood and Shadow weren't expensive at all. Like Midblot, the company that I used, the process is so good. They do any number of revisions that you require. I've made tweaks to Memories about 10 to 15 times, just minor things. And the same with the Broken Gods. I'd say take your time. It's quite easy when you're in control of the book to want it to go out to your readers as quickly as possible. I'd say just slow down and make sure that you get everything right, because once it's out in the world, it's out in the world. People will see that are made. So just take your time with it, get an editor, make sure it's as good as it can possibly be, and then wait for it to be read by others.
Yeah, I imagine the editing process is I don't want to use this word, but I feel like it's appropriate. It's probably quite brutal because you're having your story torn apart.
Yeah. And there's the two big types of editing as well, is obviously getting an editor that looks at the whole scope of the story and the structure, make sure everything makes sense. Editing, which is looking out for those tiny little mistakes, like putting the full stop in the wrong place or getting some grammatical errors, because no matter how good you are writing, when you're writing a 130 to 170,000 word novel, you're not going to spot the mistakes yourself because you're looking at it. So you've got to get it out to an editor and make sure that it's as clean as possible for when obviously it's out with the readers.
Yeah, the grammatical errors are, I mean, I can understand if grammar is something very important to a reader, or minor typos, agitates them a little bit, but I never understood including that aggravation in a review when it's something that can be fixed. And it happens in traditional publishing all the time. So that the grammatical errors, those little tiny ones left behind, you might only find one, but it's part of the process, I think.
Yeah, I think as well with self-publishing, it's to be aware that people will jump on any mistake that you make. I think when you go traditional publishing, people don't really jump on the minor mistakes, like the grammatical errors, because they know it's been done in-house and checked. It's almost like people are waiting to jump on it, to go, oh look, this is a self-publishing problem, because you do get a wide range of publishing. You get some books that have been rushed out with no editing whatsoever, just because it's quite easy to do through Amazon. And then you get some books that are pretty Rob Hayes kind of stuff as well. That, if it was traditional, there wouldn't be any difference to it. So I think self-pub route, you've got to be, ready for people to come at you.
Yeah. It's kind of unfortunate, but I've worked customer service for years, and there are all kinds of people. So not everyone's going to be happy with everything. Jordan here has a few questions for you. He says he asks them every live interview. The first being, what is your name? The second is, what is your quest?
Aaron S. Jones. Ooh, my quest. You know what my quest is at the moment? To finally finish Elden Ring. 70 hours in. I'm not even close to it at the moment.
That's so much time. And Jordan's last question is, what is your favorite color?
About an absence of color, black or blue.
And Chris here, there's errors in every book, including even some as famous as Sanderson. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Theo. Welcome.
Hey.
And there, Jordan saying, off you go.
I can complete my quest.
Yes. So just to sum up and wrap up here, is there something that you haven't seen in the book community that you would like to see or be able to do more of in the book community?
I'd like to see more readings from the authors, actually, within the book community online, like the actual readers, the actual authors reading their book within a group online, to see almost their interpretation of with films. I think I'd really be interested in seeing things like that. Like, when he was reading the first Lord trilogy and sort of talking about the inspirations and the certain scenes that he remembers writing. I think I'd love to see within the book community.
So would that be like a spoiler for you, or a spoiler kind of chat?
Yeah, spoiler one, I think, with older books, maybe not the the brand new ones.
Right. Yes, because give people the audience a chance to read and maybe join in.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting. I imagine it would be similar to the conversation we had with, that specific bit of music that pinpoints a scene for you. And actually, do you mind if we throw in one last question here?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
How did your friends, your family, your loved ones react when you said you wanted to start writing and ultimately publish books?
They weren't surprised, just because I'd always been into stories, and on some level I've always been writing with like a degree and things like that. I've always been obsessed with reading and just creating stories in some form. So even especially with my family aren't really fantasy readers apart from my dad. So even though they're not a fan of fantasy, especially fantasy, they were like the first people to order every book that I release, and they're always like telling their friends about it, interested in fantasy. So yeah, they're my most vocal supporters, I think. So it's really nice having that. So even if they don't read it, I don't really care. But I think they're really proud that I'm doing something that I love doing. So yeah, it's all positive.
That's fantastic. You need a good support group right off the bat when you're when you're going into these massive projects.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, for chatting with us about your books. I am very excited for book 2 in Memories of Blood and Shadow, or that sequel that's coming out, and all of these projects that you talked about, because just Memories of Blood and Shadow for me hit so it's hard to describe. It hit hard, but in a beautiful way. So I'm eager to get back into that writing.
Thank you. Yeah,
So yes,
I'll start
you.
working on I'll carry on working on the sequel now, I think. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us, for all the questions, and have a great weekend. Bye.